Welcome to Part 1 of Tracing Your African American Ancestors. This workshop is presented by the Alabama Department of Archives and History. I'm Carlie Burkett, and I'm a reference archivist in the EBSCO Research Room. I will be leading the first part of this presentation. Part 1 will focus on 20th century resources. Please tune in for Part 2 that will be led by Courtney Pinkard, our reference coordinator, and will focus on 19th century resources. Getting started. If you're new to genealogical research, there's a few things you should start with. First of all, this image shows a printed pedigree chart or a digital family tree. You can use these to record your findings. Start with yourself and record all the major events of your immediate family. Look around at home for documents that support what you already know. Interview older relatives or older family members to fill in the blanks. Start with the known and work backwards to the unknown. Develop specific answerable questions about your family history. Keep notes about your research and cite your sources. It is also important to remember historical events and time periods. This can help you connect dots and make sure that your research questions or theories are logical. Here are some important dates to remember. So let's get started. You should start with census records first. These are great because they offer an opportunity for you to trace your family and they provide a backbone for your research. So let's look at the 1940 census. The 1940 census is the most recent census record available. It can provide important information about occupation, education, marital status, or home ownership. As you will see on other census records, this information that you will find on all of these are similar, but each one is unique. For example, the 1940 census is unique in that it provides the location where an individual lived in April of 1935. So let's look at our example. Mamie Hartley rents her home in Greenville, Alabama. Her neighbor, Sadie Kendrick, lists that she was living in the same place in 1935. This is significant because this tells us that while she was living in the same place, Greenville, Alabama, she was not living in the same home. If we dig a little deeper, we can see that both women work as cooks in private homes. The 1930 census gives similar information to the 1940, but it includes additional information that the 1940 does not, such as age at first marriage, veteran status, and if the family owned a radio set. On this census record, we can see that the majority of the families live on Shepherd Street in Montgomery, Alabama. If we look at Lucy Lowe, who is the head of her own household, we see that she owns her home and her home value is estimated at $1,500. Her neighbor, Lizzie Thompson, who is listed above her on the census, rents her home for $12 a month. Lucy Lowe's daughter works as a teacher in the city school system, and her son works as a bellhop at a hotel. We can see also that the no written out to the right for the bellhop hotel indicates that this individual is not a veteran of any wars. The 1920 census shows the family of John Oliver in Mobile. Mr. Oliver rents his home and is living with his wife and 17-month-old child. He also is working as a fireman for the locomotive industry. As you can see, the 1920 census offers a lot of the same information as the previous ones, such as home ownership, occupation, marital status, but it doesn't have some of the other information or extra information that the 1940 and 1930 offer. The 1910 census shows home ownership and occupation information, much like the previous records we have viewed. However, it also reveals the number of years married, number of marriages, and how many children born or living to women. For example, let's look at Jeff and Virginia Perkins. They are a married couple living with their 4 children. Jeff and Virginia have been married for 30 years, and they are the first marriage for each. We know this because the M indicates marital status as married for this couple, and there is a 1 beside that M. That 1 indicates how many times someone has been married. If we look over by Virginia's name, we can see that she has given birth to 6 children, and 6 are still living. However, there are only 4 children in her household. This tells us that there are 2 other children that do not live in the household with Jeff and Virginia at this time. Now, if we look down at Sam Phillips, the Perkins neighbor, he has been married 3 times. The final census that we will look at is the 1900. It is very similar to the 1910, and much of the information will look familiar to you. Let's look at Mrs. Rankin. Miss Rankin is an 80-year-old woman living with her 3 grandsons. She is a widow and has given birth to 8 children, and 3 are still living. We can look at this and tell a few things about Mrs. Rankin. For example, her surname of Rankin is different than the surname Fleming of her 3 grandsons. We can assume that it's possible that maybe these 3 Fleming grandsons are the children of one of Miss Rankin's deceased daughters. However, we cannot confirm this with this census record. This is a great example of how the census can offer clues where you can use other records to expand on that research. Alabama Vital Statistics. The state of Alabama did not begin issuing birth and death certificates until 1908. Therefore, these records do not exist prior to that date. All these records are located at the county health departments or the Alabama Department of Public Health. Birth certificates are restricted for 125 years after birth, and death certificates are restricted for 25 years after death. Death certificates for roughly 1908 to the early 1970s can be found through FamilySearch.org through an affiliated Family Search library or institution. The Alabama Department of Archives and History is one of these affiliated institutions. One important thing to remember is that while we have been discussing birth and death certificates, there are, on the county level, birth and death registers. Not every county has these, but some do. They typically range from the late 1880s to the early 1900s. These can be found at the Alabama Department of Archives and History on microfilm. However, please remember that these are not as chock full of information as certificates. The birth registers typically do not list the child's name, and death registers do not list parent name. Researching county deeds. If one is interested in tracing family land, it is important to first determine when a family may have purchased it. This can be started by verifying on the census if land was rented or owned. Next, the deed would need to be located. The Alabama Department of Archives and History has deed records on microfilm, and these can be used to locate transactions. Once you have located those transactions, you can then begin to trace the deed backwards or forwards. Marriage records. 20th century marriage records show more detailed information than earlier marriages. They can include date, place of birth, name of parents, occupation, current residence, number of previous marriages, race, general physical description, and even religious denomination. The example shown is from Russell County in 1938. You can see that it offers a great deal of information, but is also a great example of how certain items can be left blank. We can see this where the religious belief of the bride and groom and their height and weight are left blank. Please remember that earlier marriages do not give this much information. Also, it varies from county to county by how much these records offer as well. Divorce records. Divorce records can be found in both the circuit and chancery court records at the county level. A statewide index from 1908 to 1937 is available on Ancestry.com and in the EBSCO Research Room. The Alabama Department of Archives and History has divorces from about the 1830s to the 1950s. After 1950, these records are recorded at the Alabama Department of Public Health. City directories. City directories can be a great resource for filling in gaps information or finding individuals between census years. They can even be used to find people who are not found on the census at all. These records will typically only show head of household or the wife of the head of household. You can find a person's business or location of home. You also can find their occupation. Remember, though, that city directories are for more populated areas. Smaller towns or rural areas will not have such resources. For example, if your family member lived in Montgomery County but not the city of Montgomery, they will not be found on the city directory. This resource can also be used as a snapshot of the time. One can look to see what the city may have been like by viewing the businesses there, advertisements, or even geographically how it's changed by looking at maps or street names. These records will even sometimes include histories of the area. Churches, hospitals, and other businesses are usually shown. Churches will sometimes list their pastors, while businesses will sometimes list their owners. Other lists will include city officials, police, firemen, state, or U.S. officials. African Americans are often designated in city directories with a C or an asterisk. In some cases, the city directory may be separated into an African American or white sections. Local newspapers. This is the final resource that we will discuss. The Alabama Department of Archives and History has the largest Alabama newspaper collection in the state. Our oldest newspaper is from Mobile and it dates back to 1811. We have newspapers on microfilm and hardbound formats. We have a great collection of African American newspapers that will help bridge some of the gap that exists for African Americans in mainstream newspapers prior to civil rights. These African American newspapers will focus on local information such as obituaries, weddings, local news, or business advertisements, specifically about the African American community. The image shown is one from an African American advertisement from Montgomery for a funeral home from the colored Alabamian. Many of our newspapers on microfilm prior to the 1960s can be found on newspapers.com. This concludes part 1 of Tracing Our African American Ancestors. Please stay tuned for part 2, which will feature Courtney Pinkard. Thank you.